Okay. Let a few more people come in and have a seat. Good evening, everyone. How are you? It's good to be here. It's good to be anywhere. I say that all the time. It's good to be anywhere here. But I'm excited about the prospect of talking about the art and the books. But the main motivation for me talking about all of this stuff is to get to know you, to find out who's in the room. I know I'm an artist and I make art full time. That's my full-time gig. I'm an artist. But how many artists are in the room? Raise your hand if you're an artist. Okay. How many writers are here? Any writers? They're artists. Yes. What do you write? Like poetry? Any poets? Spoken word artists and short stories? How about songwriters? I know it has to be songwriters here. It's in the water out here. Good to know. It's good to know that I'm in good company. We're going to talk a little bit, we've already talked about me. I'm going to talk mostly about you. I want to find out you, who you are. So who wants to do a book? Who wants to make a book? That's what I want to know. Who wants to make there be a published author or illustrator? 2 questions. You want to be a published author or illustrator. What are you doing about it? Oh. I can tell you my story. It took me 7 years. I went door to door with a portfolio to get a book deal in New York. I went to every major publishing house in New York City several times. I knew they thought I was a nut because I kept showing up every week with this portfolio, adding new art to it, trying to figure out how can I get published. We'll get to that in a minute, but I want to back it all the way up to those early years. And when I was 4, I'm the youngest of 6, and I grew up on the eastern shore of Maryland. And my grandmother lived next door. And all of a sudden I decided I want to move next door because I figured it out. Get your own room. She'll cook for me. I didn't even have to clean. I didn't even have to straighten up the bed. Oh, she doted over me. But she did something that I look back and I see what it all was. She made quilts too. She made little quilts. And when I was 4 and 5, it was just a quilt. And she also made preserves. I remember that. I remember the jars lined up like soldiers. I remember the steam. She had to sterilize these mason jars, and the pot and the stove was really, really hot. It was a tall pot with these preserves, these strawberries at one point, and then she made watermelon rind preserves. Anybody had watermelon rind preserves? Oh, y'all country, y'all so country around here. And she did it. Yes. Delicious. Delicious. And she did it. I watched her. She was like conductor of an orchestra, assembling all these jars and pouring these hot liquid things into these jars and sealing them up and getting them ready for winter. I watched her do it, and I bore witness to her doing that. But I was a kid and I still wanted to play ball with everybody else outside, so I'd run outside and play. Then we fast forward to age 15. Guess who I want to be? I want to be Julius Erving. I had an afro. Anybody know who Dr. J is? Okay, that's all I wanted to be. So I had this number 6 and an afro. I know you can't tell now, but I had one. Trust me. Yeah. And then I walked into an art class in high school, 9th grade, and the teacher gave us the supplies, and she said, just figure things out. This is the first day of art class, and I did. And I put the water in the paint, and the paint just bled all over the paper. It just went, I was mesmerized by it. It happened like a switch just went off inside of me. And I still played ball, but it was nothing like making art. I was obsessed with making art, and I made art, and I protected it. I didn't say much to people. I said, I'm gonna just make this art. And I made it at home, and I made it at school. And then my teacher said, I tell you what, take my office. Every day you make art. She was like a cheerleader, make art, just make art. continue. She was building up this work ethic in me. You got to work at it. Artists, writers, it doesn't come easy. You know that. You got to work at it. And I did. I look back, I said, what do you, because that day when I was 15, it wasn't like a Hollywood scene where, pixie dust fell over me and I became an artist that day. It wasn't like that at all. It was something that happened internally. And so I look back at my grandmother, and she made those quilts when I was a kid. And now I'm an artist. Eventually I got an art scholarship to go to Pratt Institute in New York. And I made my collages there. I didn't know where these collages came from. Intellectually, I said, I want more texture in the work, and I want more tooth. I want to expand and push the boundaries. But it wasn't until I went home to visit on holidays and I saw my grandmother's quilts that she had made 25 years earlier. And I looked closer at the detail, and I saw she did landscapes in those quilts. And then I looked at my artwork, and I did landscapes in my artwork. She handed me a silent gift. She planted a seed. It grew. We plant seeds all the time. It takes time for it to grow. This is how I know we plant seeds, because every adult in the room, you woke up one day and you sounded just like your parents. Right. It jumped out of you, it even scared you. Yes. It was there the whole time. It took time for that seed to get ignited. And when I was 15, that was the day that seed got ignited. It was there when I was 4. The seed that she planted. Because I looked at the collages and I think about the way I make art now, and I think about them jars lined up, that orchestra she was conducting. That's all, cooking is all timing. You got to do a little bit here, you got to do a little bit there, and then this is ready, and you bring it all together. It's a dance that happens. And that's what it is. And it looks very common and mundane, and it looks like it's not exciting at all, but it's so profound. When you look back over it, it's so profound because it's so divine in so many ways. And so I'm a collage artist. I make books and I make art. And you know my story. I went 7 years trying to get this book deal. But when I was a kid, my mother, she was a Head Start teacher, and she brought home books. And my favorite book, she brought home Snowy Day, Ezra Jack Keats, and Whistle for Willie and Harold. And I talk about that that boy Peter looked back at me in that book, and I noticed he had the same kind of pajamas I had. And in the book, his mother wore that house dress. It was yellow and white, that pattern, like contact paper from the 70s, I looked like my mom had one of those too. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I grew up in Maryland, and so we know about snowy days. You all know about snowy days too. So he was talking to me. I never met Ezra Jack Keats. I never met this guy, this artist. He lived in Brooklyn. He passed away in 1983. I got to New York in 1985. I just missed him. But he said something to me. He reached out across the universe and found me and held up a mirror. It says that you're not invisible. That's what art does. That window and that mirror action. The window says you can go anywhere and be anything. But when that book turns into a mirror, you see yourself. Everything. You see your whole unique self. And I do that. I try to do that in books. So we get to this thing. Oh, by the way, I'm having a lot of fun too. It's not always heavy, but I juggle all these balls as an artist. All these voices and sounds and colors are floating about me all the time. And this is the book that I got my very first book deal on. I wrote and illustrated this book called Uptown. Little boy on the cover is my nephew. He posed for the book. His name is Justin, and he was 8 when he posed for the book, and he's 25 now. Wow. I laugh and talk about him all the time because he took it to school in elementary school when it came out, and he took it to junior high, and then pressed the girls, he took it to high school, and I would not be surprised if he graduated from University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I would not be surprised if he was on campus with this book. But what a wonderful legacy for him. That's part of it too. I use family members and friends to pose for the books, to document their lives, to say you were here. And you're celebrated here. But more importantly, 2:30, every major city in the country, a little boy that looks just like this walks outside after school. Mm-hmm. I stand in the middle of Harlem and watch them from the charter schools where they wear the uniforms and the little tie. I see this kid, and this book came out 13 years ago. That kid walks outside every single day. I'm reaching across the universe, letting the kid know that I never met before, that you are here, that I see you, like Peter did for me in Ezra Jack Keats' book. Uptown. This is how the story goes. It says, Uptown's a caterpillar. Well, it's really the Metro North as it eases over the Harlem River. Uptown is chicken and waffles served around the clock. At first it seems like a weird combination, but it works. It sure does. Uptown is a row of brownstones. I like the way they come together when you look at them down the block. They look like they're made of chocolate. Uptown is weekend shopping on 125th Street. The vibe is always jumping as people bounce to their own rhythms. Uptown is a stage. The Apollo Theater has showcased the greatest entertainers in the world. I hope we get good seats. Uptown is jazz. My grandfather says jazz and Harlem are a perfect match, just like chicken and waffles. Uptown is a barber shop. It's a place where last night's ball game could be more important than what style haircut you want. Uptown is a Van der Zee photograph. I saw a picture from before my dad was even born, a picture of my grandparents' wedding day. Uptown is summer basketball at the Rutgers. Anyone can rise up and be a superstar for a day. Uptown is canvas awnings on the windows to block the sun. It's like the buildings are all dressed up. Now, Uptown is little sisters. They're on their way to church in matching yellow dresses. Yes, indeed. Uptown is the orange sunset over the Hudson River. That means it's time for the street lights to come on, for me to get home and get changed. What is he getting changed to do? It's in the details. He said it's time to get home and get changed. What is he getting changed to do? To go to bed? Well, that's a great guess, but to go out where? He lives uptown. It's time to go where? Downtown. What a wonderful gesture, but that's not it. We told you earlier in the book, he said, I hope we get good seats. Okay. Yeah. Uptown is a song sung by the Boys Choir of Harlem. Each note floats through the air and lands like a butterfly. The word butterfly is so important there. Why? What was the first line of the book? Uptown's a what? Caterpillar, butterfly. What's the connection? Okay. So the book starts off as a caterpillar. Okay. Metamorphosis and okay. All right. You're sharp, I know. Uptown is Harlem. Harlem world, my world. Uptown is home. First book. So I made that book and I went on a book tour and I went to Connecticut to talk to a group of 5-year-olds, and I was there and I asked them, I said, well, what do you think you need to have to make a picture book? And some said color and words and crayons and pencil and paper and paint. But this little glorious 5-year-old stood up and said, you need purpose. And when she said it, it hit me like a ton of bricks, because up until that point, I knew I made art, but I didn't know why. As a writer and an artist that you are, you may stop and say, why am I doing this? You may get a reaction from people that see and be exposed to your work, and it may be favorable, but you ask the question, why? And I did. And then she said purpose, because up until that point, I didn't know what it was really about. All I know is I dreamt of making a book, and then it happened. And I walked into a Barnes & Noble the day that my book showed up on the shelf. And of course, I didn't see any other book in the store except mine. So I beamed to it, and I went up to it, and I saw it, and I looked at it. And I was so happy that it finally, the dream came true. But then there was a letdown, and I didn't know what that was about. It just felt like, okay, something else happened, you know. And this little girl, after the book, I went on tour, and this girl said, you need purpose to make a book. Then a light bulb went off. Purpose. And then I flew to Dallas, Texas, to a group of 8-year-olds. This was a bilingual school. These kids were from Mexico. And they stopped me at the door, all these 8-year-olds, and they said, we've been waiting for you all our lives. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, am I late? So, little girl said purpose. And when these kids said, we've been waiting for you all our lives, I figured something out. Something went off in me. They've been waiting for me to dream. Because when you have a dream and it comes true, you only get half. The other half is for them. So, when I asked you, hey, that's family right there. We'll get to you, Diane. We'll get to you in a minute. So, she just made me lose my train of thought. Let me get it back together. So, okay. The little girl said purpose, and the kids in Dallas, Texas said, we've been waiting for you. And your dreams that you have, you get half of it. When I asked you if you want to make a book, and then I said, well, what are you doing about it? The reason behind me asking the question was, there's a person waiting. I had kids at the doorway waiting, but there's somebody waiting to hear your story. They're waiting. So don't put it off. Chase it. Even if it takes you 7 years, chase it until you get it. Because there's somebody waiting to hear a word from you. And sometimes they're not in the doorway. Sometimes they're behind bars. Sometimes they're laying in a ditch. Sometimes they just need to hear a word from you. And you won't know this person. You won't even know that this person exists. They may be on the other side of the world. I know because I get emails from kids from all over the world. From Africa, from Guam, from Japan, Korea, everywhere. They want to come to Harlem and check out these brownstones that are made out of chocolate. I hope when they come here, they really don't know that they're not made out of chocolate, but so that's what's on the line. And that's what I think about when it's a privilege to be able to make a book. It's a privilege to be an artist. It's an absolute privilege. So that's what I think about when I do my books. And I have various range of ideas and subject matters that I'm attracted to. This is one, it's a poem by Langston Hughes called I Too Am America. The little boy on the cover is my neighbor. His name is Ryan, and he's autistic. Now, Ryan has a great family structure, a great school system that really supports him and cares for him. But I saw Ryan, I said, Ryan needs something that's just for him. It's nobody else. It doesn't belong to anybody else in the world. It's not from his immediate family or his school system or none of that. This is just him being the star on his own. And he posed for this book. And when the book came out, he ran up to me with the book because he took it to school. You know what this kid said to me? He said, all the girls thought I was cute. Self-esteem went through the roof. I said, okay, I'll take that. Because that's what that was about, that expanding the idea of making a book. Who actually gets the chance to show up in a book? Because as you know, and I know, when I was a kid, and maybe when you were a kid, you didn't see yourself much, whether it be in the movies, TV, or in a book. Ideas are not being reflected. A female view of the world sometimes doesn't get reflected the way you know your life is. That's how important your story is and needs to be told. So it's this poem by Langston Hughes. It's told through the eyes of Pullman porters. They did an incredible thing for America, and they don't get talked about as much as they should. I'm going to do a full book on Pullman porters, the life of a Pullman porter alone. But this is what it is. It's a short but very loaded poem. It's very sparse. He says, I too sing America as that train roars through this cotton field. I'm the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Now, in the book, the images that you saw was the Pullman porters. They did many things, but they collected all the magazines and newspapers as on the various stops that the passengers left. And as the train went crisscross the country, they would throw them out into cotton fields and corn fields, and the farmers would get them and disseminate them in the community. So if there's a great event that happened in Boston, and these newspapers and magazines ended up in Georgia, then they became conduits of culture. If they went from the South to the North, they brought blues records to the North, Midwest, and West, and East. This is what's happening down in the Delta Blues, and these musicians are here, but they've been exposed there. They were conduits of culture. But more importantly, they were afforded the opportunity to see a world that they would never had an opportunity to see riding on those trains, because only wealthy passengers rode on the train. They saw a brand new world, and they brought those stories back home. When they got on the train, and I'm sure they got a list of things. When you get to New York, I need to get this. I want some shoes and a suit and a dress and some jewelry. So they had a whole list of things that they brought back to their community that would never have gotten there, the way America was set up at that particular time. But more importantly, they put their children through school. They paid for mortgages. They raised their families. They suffered cruel treatment as well, because I often ask, well, where did they sleep? Because they couldn't sleep in a sleeping car. It's still Jim Crow segregated America. I said, where did you guys sleep? They pushed the dining room tables together. They had to sleep on the tables. And then be up early in the morning, pressed, ready to serve people. Got about 4 hours of sleep a night. You know, just an amazing story of high dignity and service and sacrifice. You know, story worthy to be told. So visually, I told it in this text on Langston Hughes. Before I go on, anybody have any questions? Yes. Really? Oh, wow. Then you know it firsthand. Yeah. How they saved their tips and coins to raise a whole family.
And he also passed away with lung cancer as a result of the residual smoke.
Yeah, that too. Safety hazard, all that stuff you expose. Yes.
My husband is from a small town in Mississippi, and he often talks about when he grew up, the most well-known and the people in the community who were middle class were the Pullman Porters.
Yes.
And they got the news from across the country because they brought the newspapers and all of that back. So they got all the news from Chicago, New York,
Yeah.
and Avery, Mississippi, because the Pullman Porters brought it back.
Absolutely, they organized and did it. E.D. Nixon, Montgomery, Alabama, Mrs. Parks, Pullman Porter, organizer, lawyer. Yes.
For the first one, when you said that the buildings were made from chocolate,
Yeah.
if they actually
Uh-oh.
like thought it was chocolate and bit into that, maybe it would probably be like,
Yes.
and it probably breaks it.
Yes. Okay. I'll buy that. That's true. That's true. Hold on, let me show you something. There's a lot that I want to show you. I brought some original artwork just to give you a first-hand look at what the work looks like up close. From two different books, Your Moon, My Moon, and Roberto Clemente. It's done in watercolor and collage. And it takes me 7 to 10 days to do each piece. It normally takes me 4 to 6 months to do a whole book. And what I do is I make the art and I bring it in and we discuss it as a company. The publishers, when I first started doing books, I didn't realize that the whole publishing house looks at the work. And it could be like 30 people and they all decide on the work. Everybody has to touch and agree. If 29 agree and one doesn't, we can't go forward. And my premise is, if you can come up with a better idea that can make this project better, then I'll redo this whole book. So that's my stand on it. Watercolor and collage. And I use really heavy watercolor paper for you artists. I use, it's like 300-pound and 400-pound watercolor paper. It's the heaviest because I'll really work the paper out. I cut into it with an X-Acto knife and superimpose other images that I've painted over top of it. This is what it looks like. Yes.
You mentioned something earlier about you're always hearing and seeing things in your head.
Yeah.
I have a cousin who is an attorney now, but she also was a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And she would hear music all the time, like in her head. Is that, can you break away from that? Is that what you experience, images?
Well, yeah, that's, see, I said I wanted to be an artist when I was younger, but ultimately what happens is the art picks you. Because when it grabs you, it will never let you go. Even if you want to, it becomes a burden to you. You want to just sometimes just sit and relax and just not really, you can't do it. Everything I see, I break it up in color, and it's always something. It's ongoing all the time. Collecting stories, I'm listening and collecting stories and body gestures and all kinds of stuff. Yes?
I aspire to be an adjunct faculty member in history,
Uh-huh.
and I hope I get the academic clearance to use books like yours and Bishop Blanco's.
Sure.
I think it's an idea whose time has come.
Yes. Okay. I appreciate that. So, also, like I've done Martin's Big Words and Rosa Parks, I got a chance to re-educate myself because I know what they told me when I was a kid, and I know what they do every year, this time of year, in the media, And they don't quite do it justice. They tell one side of the story, and it becomes this iconic side, and then that's all it is. But when I did the book, I got a chance to see the history up close, where it actually happened, people that were actually there, you know, and that's what it affords me as well. But there's new history that's been happening. Has anybody heard of Dave the Potter? Oh, yes. Incredible history. If you didn't know, Dave was a slave on a plantation in South Carolina 200 years ago. This plantation made clay pots. They did pottery where they stored meat and grain in these pots. But Dave wrote poetry on the outside of the pots. Dave made 40,000 pots in his lifetime. That's what the inventory for the plantation documented. He didn't write poetry on every pot, but he wrote them on enough. It was illegal for slaves to read and write. Great harm would come to a slave if discovered that he could read and write. Dave boldly signed his name, Dave, and dated it. In this book, Dave said, I wonder where is all my relations, friendship to all in every nation. That's what Dave wrote on the pot. I had a question about that. I said, well, he was born and he died in South Carolina. How does he talk about another nation? Story handed down to him. He was bought and sold 6 different times from just 6 different plantations. So the family structure was destroyed. The original family structure.
For the metaphor of the quilt being used as a national symbol to international symbol, of it being kind of national purpose to cross boundaries of quilt. Let's let Underground Railroad
Well,
feed you in some.
let's bring it back to Dave for a minute. Let me tell you the story. The author, Laban Carrick Hill, was watching the Antique Roadshow one day. One of Dave's pots showed up on the Antique Roadshow. He jotted it down and said, I'm going to write about it. He did. That's how I got this story. But there's a gentleman named Leonard Todd who wrote a book called Carolina Clay. He wrote this book because he was in New England at an exhibition of pottery, and one of Dave's pots was there, and he looked at it and he saw the inscription on the side. It said, Edgefield, South Carolina. Well, Leonard Todd was from Edgefield, South Carolina, so he was really intrigued about this pot made by this slave named Dave. And he did more research about his town and the history of his town, and he wrote a book called Carolina Clay. And in that book, you discover that 10 governors came from this one town, Edgefield, South Carolina. If you go there today, you'll see a statue in the middle of town of Strom Thurmond. That's his town. But also, he said and discovered that Dave was owned by 6 different plantation owners. Every one of those owners was his relative. So he had to do something, so he wrote this book. One of the plantation stops that Dave was on owned a newspaper press, and Dave was a typesetter in the newspaper press. That's where we believe Dave was taught to read and write. This is a unique town. I saw a newspaper from the time that when Dave was alive, and there was a roving reporter that stopped and interviewed Dave walking down the road. I said, something's going on in this town. And of course, I do research, so I had to go to the plantation. I wanted to see the ground that Dave walked on and the sky that Dave walked under. I needed to see it for myself. So I did. I went down there, and I ended up getting there on a Sunday morning. Everybody was in church. It was a deserted town until I got there. I rented a car and drove in. It had New York tags. It was a Mustang, and I drove up. And I was just looking around. I was like, well, I'll just wait till the shop's open. And I turned around. To the other corner of the town square, 2 pickup trucks pulled up, and they stayed over there. And I looked into the store, and I turned around, 4 pickup trucks, and they stayed over there. And they were watching me, because in any small town, anybody knew that walks in a small town, you know. You don't even have to leave your house. You just know somebody's here. So I said, okay. I'm looking around. I'm like, all right, I'm here by myself. Let me see. Who's open? What store is open? And let me see, can I talk to somebody? These gentlemen came over to me and led me. I asked them, I said, well, I'm doing a book on Dave the Potter, an enslaved potter that lived right here. And they took me around. These guys took me around to this master potter in the back of the town. His name was Stephen Farrell. And sat me down and told me the whole story about Dave. I know what I thought was getting ready to happen, but it didn't. It just took me there. And I sat down and we just talked. He owned 3 of Dave's pots. That was the place where I got a chance to hug this incredible pot and touch the signature of Dave. And this area in South Carolina, you can pull up 10 different colors, pieces of clay out of the ground. It's just so abundant. So it was perfect that this plantation was situated by the river, and that's what their main income was. So we talked about that in the day of Dave and the way he made pots. And he had a wealth of knowledge, as Stephen Farrell does. And he's still there making pots. And I got a chance to see it up close. But before I got down there, I said, I'm going to buy one of Dave's pots. I want one of them for me. Until they told me how much they cost now. The little one I wanted was 175 grand starting. And the bigger ones, they wanted $500,000 starting. Wow. Every major museum in the world clamoring to get the pots. They found a pot under somebody's house next to the lawnmower while I was there. They were in plain view. They were out in people's yards with plants in them. Nobody knew what they had. They were by the door with umbrellas in them. In the attic, grandma left this pot. It's been in the family forever. It's just in the corner. It's a Dave pot. Nobody knew. He had relatives, descendants that are still there today in Edgefield, South Carolina. Dave does. Not one owns a pot. They're out of reach now. They're high art. They were never meant to be high art, but they're high art now. In the middle of my research while I was there for about 4 days. They said, Dave lost a leg in a train accident. I said, he lost a leg. How does a slave survive an amputation 200 years ago? Okay. I then said, well, he lost a leg. Then who kicked the wheel then? Because he made the bigger 40-gallon pots after he lost the leg. Who kicked the wheel? You can't make pottery with one leg because you have to have balance with the other if you're kicking it with one. They said they brought in another slave that lost his arms to kick the wheel. I said, nobody's going to believe this story. I don't even believe it. So yeah, that's it. That's the way it was. And in this book, Dave the Potter, he has only one leg in the picture. I didn't bring the other slave in with the no arms because it's hard to put all that together. It's distracting to put all that together in one, so I focused just on Dave. That's how this book came about. Discovered only 25 years ago. History laying in plain view, screaming out from 200 years like a newborn baby to be seen and discovered, just sitting out front in plain sight. He made 40,000 pots. There are pots everywhere. Just haven't found them yet. They're all over the country. So if you go to a state sale or a yard sale and you see an old pot, you better check it out. You might have something. Dave the Potter. Okay, here we go. To us, it's just dirt, the ground we walk on. Scoop up a handful, the gritty grains slip between your fingers. On wet days heavy with rainwater, it's cool and squishy, mud pie heaven. But to Dave, it was clay, the plain and basic stuff upon which he learned to form a life as a slave nearly 200 years ago. To us, it's just a pot, round and tall, good for keeping marbles or fresh-cut flowers. But to Dave, it was a pot large enough to store a season's grain harvest, to put up salted meat, to hold memories. Each one began out of a cloud of dust, clotted clumps of clay ground in the pug mill and carried wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow to Dave's spinning potter's wheel. With a flat wooden paddle large enough to row across the Atlantic, Dave mixed clay with water drawn from the Big Horse Creek until wet, stiff, and heavy. He threw the clay sometimes 60 pounds at once, and nobody knew where or how it would land except Dave. He kicked his potter's wheel until it spun as fast as the carnival's wheel of fortune. And like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Dave's hands buried in the mounted mud and pulled out the shape of a jar. That's what he did. His chapped thumbs pinched into the center and squeezed the inside against his fingers on the outside. And the wheel spun round and round. The walls of the jar rose like a robin's puffed breast, but so far before its immense weight threatened collapse. The jar grew so large, Dave could no longer wrap his strong arms around it. If he climbed into the jar and curled into a ball, he would have been embraced. Only then did he stop his potter's wheel and roll long ropes of clay between his dry, caked palms. Dave mounted these coils one by one on the half-finished jar. He ran his wet fingers along the sides to smooth it all together, kicking the wheel with the heel of his foot. The shoulders and rims shrugged upward as the jar took shape. Dave knew was there even before he worked the raw mound on his wheel. While the clay dried, Dave pounded wood ash and sand to mix a glass-like brown glaze to withstand time. We're almost there, almost there. But before the jar completely hardened, Dave picked up a stick to let us know he was here. He said, "I wonder where. It's all my relations, friendship to all in every nation." Here's some of Dave's jars. That's brand new history right there. Now, before I let you go, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever heard of Knock Knock before? There's an actor named Daniel Beatty in New York. He wrote this book. I didn't know Daniel until I saw him do a performance monologue on HBO, Russell Simmons' poetry thing that he does. And he did this monologue called Knock Knock. It was about a little boy who plays a game with his dad every morning called Knock Knock. They play Knock Knock. And then one morning, this knock didn't come. So we find out as this boy's world crumbles, as he desperately searches for what happened to my dad. But the joy that comes in the morning in this book is that in spite of his loss, he creates a beautiful life for himself, a beautiful family for himself in spite of it all. Knock, knock. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to talk to you about these images. It's called Knock Knock. You can YouTube it. It's still on. If you YouTube Daniel Beatty, Knock Knock, you'll see what I saw. That's that joyful boy just waiting and anticipating for his dad to show up early in the morning to wake him up to play that game, knock, knock. And once his dad came, he would jump into his dad's arms and say, I love you, Papa. And Dad would say, I love you, son. They did that every morning. They played that game called knock, knock. If you look closely, there's a motif of elephants marching on the wallpaper in this boy's bedroom. Knock, knock. Then one day, that knock did not come. Those elephants kept marching, and there was a rainbow on the wall of this boy's room. And then the next day he didn't come, and the next day he didn't come, and that rainbow fell. That's the internal life of that kid who left this boy in America trying to figure out this world all alone. He's a prince, and he got left behind. His rainbow fell. And Lord knows his mother comforted him. This woman, look at this hand. Look at the hand of any woman in the room. They've saved many a generation. Just the comfort of a hand. I celebrate her. She explains to him, but it doesn't fill that hole. They were playing this game called knock, knock. So he still longs for his father. What happened to this father? This boy's world starts to crumble. The buildings start to shake, and they're not upright and straight as they used to be. The color of the sky is not as blue as it should be. This boy's world is falling apart. So what he decides to do is, I'm going to write my dad a letter to find out where you are. And on the calendar behind him, you'll see X's of all the days that he's been gone. And so he writes a letter, and he makes it into a paper airplane, and he throws it out the window. This letter, looking for his dad. And magically, he decides to jump on that plane and take a ride, searching for Dad. What happened to Dad? We used to play knock, knock every morning. So he takes a ride over the city and over the buildings. And when he got over top of the buildings, he looked down and saw that if you look closely, there are faces on every building. This kid is not alone. This is a universal story of loss, whether it be divorce or death or incarceration. What happened to Dad? He says, Daddy, would you come home? Because I'm forgetting who you are. And I forget what you look like. And those elephants marched on. Those elephants represent remembering. Just please remember. Never forget. Just please remember. They marched on, and the airplane comes back into the room. And this boy is isolated in the doorway, absolutely lost. Then this letter finally shows up from Dad. And Dad explains, Dear son, I'm sorry I won't be coming home. But remember these words, and remember that the best of me still lives in you. That's what he said. That's what he said. And tell your mama to cook you those favorite scrambled eggs that you and I both like. And remember to do your homework before you watch TV. That's what he said. He said, remember when you shave in one deliberate direction to avoid irritation. And dribble your pen on the paper with the brilliance that is within you. That's what he said in this letter to his son. His son eventually grows up in that shot right there. He goes from a boy to a man. He grows up and he has his own business. And if you saw earlier in his room when he was a little kid, he had construction trucks. And so he has a construction business as a man. He's a builder of community. He's a builder. And the sky is a little bit bluer. He created a beautiful life for himself and his own family. He celebrated. That sky is brilliant blue, and the balloons represent the joy of his new life as a man. And they celebrate him. They celebrate his neighborhood. And they had a party for him, and they gave him a gift. It's that present sitting on that they're going to surprise him with. His wife gave him a gift. And when he opened up this box, and it was his daddy's hat. And in the last shot, he's seen hugging his father. But if you look closely, His father is really not there. You can see right through him. He's a hologram. But the letters and the notes and everything he ever wanted to say fell from heaven. It just fell upon both of them. He made a beautiful life in spite of. We need to talk to our children about whatever happens, whatever hurdles you need to get over, you can still create a beautiful life in spite of. In real life, Daniel's father was incarcerated. They call him Daniel the next Sidney Poitier. He's an actor, a stage actor now, but you're going to see him change everything out. He wrote about what happened to his father. His father just got out of prison. And he's seen the book. He discovered the great life that Daniel has created for himself. They're trying to put it back together now. So he wrote this book called Knock Knock, because that's what they used to play every day until one day that knock didn't come. Okay. Listen, I didn't talk to you enough. I appreciate and thank you for coming. If you have any questions, you can always come up to here. I have limited edition prints that are available, and we have credit card access as well. You have tons of books back there that I'd love for you to get, and I'll sign as well. Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing this night with me.